Yeah, like my problem was if I had done the bleed that Steve wanted me to do, Jan can't play Dreams, but I still think he ousts Steve, and I'm in the same position. Like I needed to get him. I needed to get Jan before Steve was out, so Steve could bleed into you, and he at least had some combat, so that you two could butt heads. And I was just going to let that happen.
Beads.
I was going to let that happen for a while because I have enough intercept that I could deal with his law firmness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was my plan. I just couldn't execute it. I was one, like if I was holding the propaganda, if I was holding any other bleed card that would have been an ousting bleed, I would have taken it. But I don't think the game ends up different. My issue was like you rush and that's bad, and I didn't have any of my majesties early, and there's only 5 or 6. I mean, I got rushed 3 times in a turn late in the game. Like, let's see, how many pool in vampires did I have?
A lot.
Let's see, 5, 10, 15, 24 pool in vampires in Torpor. And this is a deck that plays no cards that actually get me pool, except for Montreal and Art Museum and stuff. Like, I don't have any blood dolls or anything like that.
No, but you got the public trust, which is kind of
a
nice alternate way of gaining pool, isn't it? Because I like that because it's, you're forcing yourself to go forward, and you don't have to worry about do I mess around. So as long as you keep flowing cards and you draw the reactions to bounce or whatever, then it's fine.
Right, and that's the problem. I flowed into reactions and then you wouldn't bleed. I was like, okay, I gotta get these reactions, and I knew Steve was gonna have votes, and I actually at one point thought he was gonna get through you pretty fast, so I held delaying tactics much longer than I would have otherwise, because he was making good progress. It was an interesting game, but I'm going on the record that as of the time that this game was played, that Aid from Bats was not a legal card in the V5 meta because it was not yet printed. Is I'm going to say Hugh needed illegal cards to beat me.
Yeah, I don't think. I think they really struggle without the potence is far riskier for them because their crypt has got quite spread disciplines, but it's got far more superior animism.
Yeah, right.
And the spirit animism is far more useful for, being able to chuck out the pack alpha is expensive, but you can chuck that out, and the deep song is, obviously very good at spirit animism, that flexibility. So you kind of need to have that aid from bats really for them to make them more viable. They could really do with probably a 4-cap spirit animism basic obfuscate as well, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean,
missed that.
I think what they need is aid from bats. First and foremost.
Yeah, that aid from bats is such a classic card. It's such a really powerful card with Carrion Crows. It's 6 damage from 2 cards.
Right, with almost no drawback at all.
Yeah, with almost no drawback. You're at range in round 1, and you can choose to press if you're not going to get massive hit back, and if you are, you don't. Like, I mean, it's so good.
Yeah, I honestly thought we would see a aid from bats that's not aid from bats. An aid from bats where the superior is anything other than a press. Literally anything other than a press.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a classic, strong combo.
Yeah.
And it's super efficient with Deep Song. Because you get in combat when you want to, and you oust when you don't.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then particularly if you add on... so I went to this tournament in Norwich. I want to say like 2 weeks ago. I need to try and figure out how to submit the event for them. And Antonio was using this deck, as I was saying, which was using these Primogen and a few other Spiralism folks. And it was just the deck was using a load of Asher tablets. So he was just playing a load of Crows, load of Age from Bats, load of Terror Frenzies, and zoom, so a couple of targets and a couple of tastes. So very, very mono, because I think it was running. I'm sure he was running 12 or more protected districts. So like it's doing a lot of stuff.
Right.
just repetitive stuff. And with the Asher tablets, you can really make that work for you, and you've got enough flexibility with the deep songs to make that work. But it is, I mean, there's so much more combat around anyway. I don't think it's not like there's horrible days where you had 2 and 3 cap arms and rush decks, which would tear through people really, really quickly. I think it's a bit more balanced now because there's just a lot more combat ends.
Yeah.
I mean, that is true, and there is a lot of combat ends. It still makes other combat packages that other clans are trying to do that aren't the gangrel look a little bit not as good. I think like Aid from Bats is a card that makes Potence kind of feel bad for being combat discipline when it feels like sometimes it's really outed by animalism combat when you can just maneuver away in a lot of cases, and Potence always needs something to help catch up.
Definitely. So his predator when I had him in a primary round with the gun deck, it didn't really matter. I was dying to the Sombra bleed and vote, so I didn't really enter combat with him. But in the final, he had like a Alonso Petrodon and friends, and that was all about the slam, close range, and quite varied combat, in fairness. Like, get the preternatural strength, hit you for a lot, but with some other interesting cards in there. And he just didn't need to worry about it at all with the Terror Frenzy. Like, he could really neutralize that until he ran out of blood, or he ran out of, just doesn't have it, that combat kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's that combo, like the Terror Frenzy plus the Carrion Crows plus the Aid from Bats, and that is much more stable on 5 caps who can then do protected districts. I think it's quite an interesting way of playing it. Whereas the original kind of weenie deep song rush was fairly vulnerable. Like, you had to go backwards to knock people off. Then you had some Raven Spies to enable you to survive a bit, but the protected district's far more reliable, I think.
So yeah, I mean the protected district strategy when you're running NOS, I feel like it is a really good strategy, especially to force upstream, because you're not putting the pressure on your prey, so you can continue. You can let things kind of go up the stream the way they're supposed to, while still forcing nothing to be able to come past you in the time if you happen to be playing against bleed, or if you've done well, maybe even hold off vote for a while until they get reverse ousted all the way up, and you don't even have to extend a lot of combat backwards.
No, I think it's quite lucky in a strange way playing in a 4-player table as well. Like, it's it's far more designed, that ratio of disciplines in 4 players. I mean, same with the that horrible presence package in fairness, Carl. Like, in 4 players, you got a good chance of going through everyone.
Yeah,
without
right.
running out of vampires and minions.
I mean, the fact that this is actually this is more of a kind of a toolbox version than a straight up presence, because I'm running a decent sized reaction package because I want the bounce. Because the typical V5 meta is very fast, right? And you like so the predators this deck doesn't like are predators that don't bleed much and predators that enter combat, and you're both, right? Like if I had anybody else as a predator, like the pass through offense on top of my own offense would have just been horrific. And I would have easily carved up the table. Like I could have worked through you even with all of your shenanigans between my own stuff and passing through,
I can't. You run out of protected districts, right? Particularly when people are bleeding for 6.
Yeah. So there's and I mean the other good thing with these guys is the loop is like so good at getting by that lone blocker or a really wide board to really land one. But the fact that it doesn't go away if I get blocked is just it's such a great card for Toreador. But yeah, there's only 22 cards in this deck that increase my bleed, which is it's a significant portion of the deck, right? It's 2/7 of my deck. So it's a lot there. But at the same time, right, like it's matchup dependent. A stealth vote predator is also problematic. Like I would not have had an issue with Steve, for instance, because
Yeah,
my
one is
my bounce
acceptable.
doubles. My bounce doubles is intercept, and I can get. I could probably block some of the votes. But he's kind of law firm style, so then it's a matter of wearing me out, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
but
number of minions versus number of minions, basically.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so for me, it's just like but by that point, I hope I have the minion advantage because I'm running a bunch of guys, and he's.
Yeah, which theoretically you should. Theoretically, you should in that position. Yeah.
I mean, let's. All right. I mean, I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 vampires in play.
Mm-hmm.
In a deck that literally has Novolane, Blood Doll, Vessel.
Yeah, and I'm lucky if I hit 5 vampires, and that requires me to be able to govern as early as I can and as often as I can.
So yeah, my biggest issue was just I couldn't get Jan fast enough, and I couldn't. I knew once I didn't get Jan, the table was going to break for Hugh unless I got really, really lucky.
I mean,
so I was holding that propaganda in hopes that might get through on you, Hugh, and that you might not have something for Horus, but every time you did. So
yeah,
I did make one mistake which annoyed me a bit. I was too fearful because I could have ousted Steve a turn earlier.
No, you couldn't have. You would not have gotten me the turn earlier. The turn earlier, I had a way to stop that. It was that next turn where my hand fully went to shit.
Did you have Archon Investigation?
I did not have an Archon Investigation, no. But you would. Neither of those would have landed. I had double deflection at that time.
Fair enough, but these would have helped me either way too.
Yeah.
I had enough spying missions, which would have paid off.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely. No matter what, I think you would have ended the way that hand was drawing out. There was no way, like even looking at my deck, there was no way I was coming back from this. If I would have cycled the number of cards I thought about cycling down, I would have maybe come out of it. But by the time I knew that I should have cycled, I needed every other card before that for continuing to put pressure on. Otherwise, I wasn't putting pressure on. So I was like stuck in this weird state of like, if I pitch cards, like there's too big a chance that one of the situational cards comes up and it's a worse card. But I need to have a certain flow going. So I put myself in a bad situation. The worst part was drawing all of my voter caps in a row, one right after another. And then like as soon as I finally fixed my hand, I drew into hold on, let me reveal my hand because my brain is lapsing. I drew into like perfect paragons in a row, and it was like, okay, like now that I want the perfect paragons to be able to cycled, I didn't have those. Instead, I had a bunch of voter caps with the one political card I cycled because of the time. No one's pool was dropping below mine. Or staying above mine, rather.
You can always speak from Carl, I think. But
yeah.
Right. Yeah,
but that seemed bad in a lot of ways.
My other thought was to not oust John the turn that I did and try and give him one more turn to wear you down, Hugh, and take out more of your resources.
Yeah, I think that might have been the play.
I thought about that, but then, and I think what happens is if he accidentally ousts you, I end up with 2 VPs in a split instead of 1 VP in a loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think,
but you've got to. I guess the fun thing is you want to try and go for the win and see if you can try and get the 3, right?
No, I agree, but I debated that. I'm like, I kind of had faith that you could stop him. So I thought about leaving him at like 1 pool. And then he has to yield the troublemaker. And then I so I get that back.
It's reuse it. Yeah.
And then, but he's probably tapped out again, except for Jake. And I'm like, well, that gives him a chance to get bounced, which may or may not help. Like, so there was so many variables there. And I was like, I was like, Huey probably uses some protected district. Like he's already low on pool. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I didn't want to put in play at this table because of your deck was the Montreal, but I literally played that card to see what I was going to get. And that was trying to get Jan before Jan got
Yeah.
Steve, and I did not want that on. I did not want that on the table. But
you're not getting it back, are you? Really?
No.
Well,
no.
I guess you might be able to trick
against
to
you.
get it back.
Against you, I probably won't get it back. Like, I wouldn't mind it if Steve took it. I can get it back. And I've got enough wake and stuff. But like when the combat deck that's set up to be a intercept combat gets it, I know it's done. And I knew that you were going to make a stab for it because you were low on pool.
Yeah, I really needed that.
Yeah, and I was like, if this gets me any of my +2 bleed cards, I get the oust. And that's how critical I felt that oust was, is I was willing to put a card in play I knew was going to hurt me long term.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
fun.
So anyway, in terms of what I feel like my deck is missing at this point, not very much. Like, you guys brought Man Enemy's Enemy in with Salubri. Yep. You got Jake Washington in with promos. You've got and you got Coven in Hakata. And those are like the last few pieces I needed. I mean, I took an early version of this deck that was V5 only to a Gulf Coast Roast event in Gulfport, and that was 20 some people there. Sort of regular tournament format, but I was playing this, which had no non V5 cards in it, and I made the final. And I made a decision that, in hindsight, it felt right at the time, but with hindsight being 2020, sure, it was the wrong decision. I mean, I was one card away from winning that final with a V5 only deck in a non V5 environment.
Yeah,
because this thing it's nasty when it gets its flow on. And in that tournament, I had a Salubri block prey, it was an initial prey. And that round, I rescued Mambo Gene. I Giants blooded Mambo Gene, who was my grand prey, because they kept just butting heads. And I'm like, my Predator was Ministry. I'm like, I mind them backward twice to slow that down. And then just sat there and just built my play space until I felt everybody was weak, and I ousted my prey and grand prey in one turn. It's a really good deck. Like, this is, I would take this to anything, right? Like, it's solid. It works in the V5 meta, and it's only V5 cards. The only thing I might want is an Auspex Master. You guys have still not printed the Auspex or Presence Master cards.
Yeah. Can we please?
Yeah, there's no reason for them not to come. It's more where, but yeah.
Right.
I can't remember I don't think any of them are any of the Sabat decks, are they?
No.
But
so I mean, in terms of like looking at these decks, though, like, what is the missing piece that's not in V5? Like, an Auspex Master would mean I'm not so reliant on making sure I get one of my 5 vampires with superior Auspex. I got 2 other vampires with inferior, and I can boost them up.
But obviously,
exactly worth it.
Grand scheme, that doesn't make it less playable. Like, the deck is fully playable and capable.
I mean,
go ahead.
The only thing. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Jan. No, Jan. Carl's talked the most. Jan, you talk. You talk right now.
No, I submitted to Gines a slightly politics. Or we can maybe turn the camera on if you want. Which was a like some splash of politics, but I chose not to do it because I felt like it feels like Melks are supposed to have the political angle, but it's way harder to construct it. So Stealth Bleed is working fine. I mean, with this deck or some iterations of it, I've made 2 or 3 finals. But yeah, I feel like another angle, like more options for Stealth Bleed votes would be nice.
But I don't think the Malks are supposed to be a political clan necessarily. Like, it is an angle, but I feel like sometimes this is done for the longer term future and not the shorter term future. Historically, the Malks aren't really highly political, so it kind of makes sense for them not to be now. Am I off base here with the intention?
So the intention of the new blood was like, here's a politics angle you can try with them. It's so there were always politics decks with them before, both with and without presence, right? So the presence is cheating, right? Because that's basically just to obfuscate. With presence, that could be anybody almost. But the original stuff where you were trying to do things like telepathic vote counting with them was interesting, and you could also do stuff with so a card that is probably tricky, like Derange and Markavian Dementia, that has a lot of ways of doing really cool politics stuff. It was broken with Protect Thine Own, because you could do very unpleasant things. But you could also just do cool stuff with Banishment. I do think that's a way with Puppet Master. Like I like what you did there. There are ways to make that work on a political angle, but also like control. So rather than politics for the sake of politics, I'm going to do 3 Chaos Seas a turn or whatever. More, you can slow that down. You can do more control. You can govern down, get more minions out. You can use Puppet Master and have a big turn to get extra bonus actions set up and do things like that. I'd like to see how that goes. I think it has time to do that because there are lots of fast decks in the format that are bleeding, but like a Malkavian deck in general can survive those. There are lots of toolboxy slow things as well, so I think you do something clever. I think doing a standard vote deck in the same way as you would have done with Ventrue perhaps in the past is tricky. There's just a lot of barons around, as we've discussed before, right?
I think,
so is it your thought, Hugh, that it's like more banishments and opportunistic?
I'd use them as control,
and reigns of power. Like after you Puppet Master, you can really screw your prey.
Exactly. Particularly if they've only got 1 minion, right? And I think the Iron Fist helps with that as well, because that's the kind of card you can call and appropriately deal. I mean, you can always do the Chaos Seas 2/2, and people are a bit weird about that. Like I often play with newer players or players who've returned, and they just look at the number of votes on the table and they go, "Oh, I can't do anything with my votes." And it's like, you can always do something, okay? And maybe it isn't actually the best thing for you to do anything, but that's a separate problem. But there's always ways of doing stuff, and I think your Iron Fist, your banishments, your reigns of power, they've all got fun things to do. Like you can make stuff happen. And you can always do the parity shift. Can I parity shift my prey to give my predator 3 pull? So you're doing pull damage forwards. So you're still moving things along.
The idea what I was gonna take was like have 3 Puppets Master and like 4 vote cards like Killer Empowerment, Anarchist Uprising, Banishment, and Expulsion. Like just 1 each, with the idea to take, like I took Steve's Baron, Steve's Prince. So get my votes with actions instead of like modifiers. But maybe I need some more tinkering.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different thing, right? Like, I like the fact, as we talked about, I'm never going to rush Evan because it's just too painful. That 50-50. Also, coin flips. I don't know why we thought of that. Terrible mechanism.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see coin flips return in V5. I was like, oh, I thought like Magic the Gathering and all the other card games that had come out had taught us that like the coin flip is not fun in a game that's supposed to be this kind of game that's about precision. But
yeah, I mean, the mounts are supposed to be a bit random, right? In the precognition, it's more mechanically. I'd rather roll a standard D6. But again, it's more tech you have to carry around and have with you.
I think your better solution is to make it insightfully flavorful. So it's a downside and an upside. So have it have something to do with a random card chosen from hand and the type of card that it is. Right? I think you guys have done that really well with a couple of other cards where that's mechanically how the randomness works. It's look at a top card of your crypt, or reveal a top card from a deck, or like those kinds of things are more like what the Malkavian are. Sure, there's chaos in it and randomness, but there's also insight that's often attached to it, whether it be insight for others inadvertently or insight for yourself.
Don't know. I'm trying to think what else we've got with coin flippy. Just Evan?
I think it is at this point just Evan. Yeah.
Just Evan.
Let me make sure.
But yeah,
I'm sure.
interesting.
So other than the aid
Evan.
from bats, Hugh, like what do you feel like you would want in V5 for the deck that you just played?
So I think Terra Frenzy would make it. I think that's probably all it needs on top of that, really. It could do with someone, as I said, someone who's a crypt, who's got Spirit Alarmism and Basic Obfuscate at Cap 4. That would be great as well. But ideally, it's a Primogen. I don't think it needs much more. Like having access. Like I don't have AI in there, but having like AI should be in there. I would have liked Blood Dolls as well. Because of just how I run. Like I with a deck like that, I like to be able to push as well as pull, and Blood Doll's better for that. So I would probably run 4 and 3. And Blood Doll sort of is and isn't in 5th edition in the sense of it's in the handouts, but it's not in anything else currently.
I thought it was. Did I
Blood Dolls.
remember that?
Blood Dolls and something.
What is it?
Yeah, they are in a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Whatever thing I used to look at stuff, I made an error. So I would have split that with half of those would be Blood Dolls on my vessels. I'm running 7 vessels, so I'd probably do 4 and 3. There isn't much else that you can gain on there. But what else I'm missing is there is probably that card. Let's see if that's in anything, because I only thought about that afterwards.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, so maybe Confusion of the Eye would go in as well.
Yeah,
I think there's enough Superior Obfuscate to make it work in the crypt, because I've got I'm playing 1 of Oscar because he's kind of cute. I want to see how that works. I'm playing 1 Cedric, 2 Larissas and 2 Dowagers, and a Belinda and an Oculus. Just wanted to play Oculus to draw cards because it's cute. So I think there's enough Superior Obfuscate in the crypt, right? So there's 8. So I think Confusion of the Eye would be a missing card. I'd rather use that than delaying tactics.
Also, a little bit of a props here to you guys on this development angle, but the idea of having more vampires that are kind of like a location built into the vampire is a really nice touch that I think really kind of got forgotten about for a little while there in VTES as it started to get older in age.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting, like reflective of the thematicness as well. I think, like you can do stuff. I really liked. I think is it Paul Cordwood? Can't remember his surname.
Yes.
The trivia anti-trivia. I really liked that.
Yeah.
So it's nice having similar effects on people as well. It also means then when you're managing their resource, you have to think about it in a different way, right? So if Oscar, if I got him out, I want to be able to use his blood, and he gets bashed up a bit. I don't have that; it doesn't work so well. He's got the stealth though, which is quite helpful for the rushes and for other things. But if I've burnt through his resource, it's kind of kaput. I don't really want aims in 5th edition.
Please
Carl.
no, God no.
Yeah,
Wow,
I didn't think you did.
No, they just make combat should be about playing combat cards ultimately, and your combat disciplines, so like potence, celerity, fortitude, animalism, etc., should be doing things and be doing things that are more terrifying than basic cards that everybody can do.
Yeah, this is
yeah,
why I
I
think concealed weapon shouldn't be in the format, by the way. Disguised weapon, sure. But concealed weapon as a generic
Get it?
thing, I don't think.
Hey, one of
That-
those
that
things Jan and I
leads
agree
me
on
to a-
wholeheartedly.
All right.
That leads me to a question about the draft kit. Is that intended to be in the V5 space, or is that?
It is, which is why I need to really think bits of it. So I looked at it when Christoph first built it, and then there's some back and forth of cards to be changed, things like that. Is concealed currently in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Concealed probably needs to go. I think I do agree with you on concealed. So I love concealed, and I think guns are a really great way to manage Earthmeld Anarchs. Like it slows them down, and you've got a good chance of doing enough damage over the long run. But they're also a bit dull. And when I look at the Brouillard, they're not built to need guns. And I appreciate I just used them recently in that event with guns. But the potence has got so much better with Dust Up and with Roundhouse. I don't think it needs it anywhere near as much. And the Brouillard crypt. So like if we talk about clans that had historically quite poor crypts, Brouillard's right up there, I would suggest. Yeah. Now I feel there's enough of them that they're missing superior celerity, or not that much superior celerity. So on the Barons, anyway, you've got 2, right? So you got
that doesn't
Saku.
matter with Anarchs, though.
No, but it does if you're using Psyches.
Right. Sure.
So I think my basic point is that they're geared to use potence and be naturally happy with potence. Yeah. So it means on the concealed, who's actually benefiting from it? Like Toreador, maybe, but I don't think anyone else really cares that much.
Well,
could use it with Banu, but
I feel like for the Toreador with regard to guns, you've given them essentially free. You've basically given all of them freak drive, and if things go really my way, you've given them forced march, which really just gives them the ability to have their sneak out a gun without actually getting the surprise sneak out a gun.
And they've got Grand Ball access anyway, right? And they've got different ways of doing it, right? You could even have, you can have Anarch Toreadors with Hackerspace and Grand Ball to get free guns. So I don't think it's a big deal for them. Although I agree, as Carl said, I think their crypt is not as good as it could be in terms of like they could do with some presence and Auspex options if you want to put that in.
Yeah, a Remilliard Devout Crusader card for Group 7 as a Toreador would be amazing.
Love that guy.
Just for them in general, because it gives them a small vampire that has superior Auspex, right? They've got a lot of celerity going on there. I mean, but in my mind, like when you talk about the Bruja and guns, I would not favor necessarily a 44 with them. I would like a sawed-off shotgun.
I really like
5 because
Johnny Ito introduced me to shotguns and how they're still good.
Yeah.
Because it's such a shock to the system. It's like, what's happening? Why am I being shot for 3? I did my counting. I should just be 2.
Right. Well, and it's fine. It matches their dust up damage, but it's a permanent. It goes on and it's cheap. They don't care about the range. So you maneuver. Yeah, it's only once a combat, but that once a combat is enough because it's wearing them down, and that's what the Bruja need. Like, I don't think they need to be running 44s. I have built the mostly all dust up version of the crypt, but mine was a couple of shotguns in there because I'm like, then I don't have to play the dust up. Or sometimes I just want to be able to not play a card and do 3, right? And 3 is just exponentially more than 2. It's just shocking how much 3 makes a difference over 2.
And it's great for dealing with pesky things like Nefandite, which seem to have re-risen. Well, I mean, that's one thing. Okay. I am.
Is this a thing you can't say? If you can't, that's fine.
No. Just need to see. And one of the things is to see how these new ally decks do. Wasn't quite expecting the Hikata to do quite so well off the bat, which is quite nice to see.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I got a whole bunch of requests for a V5 for the Hakata because we needed coolers, man. Of course, those are in the draft kit, but
yeah, and those could probably stay in the draft kit, right? Like,
yeah, right.
If British Museum turns out to be a problem, right, then I'm not a fan. Like when I was playing, I mean, I'd never played serious Magic, but when I was playing Magic a lot, from basically Homelands, well, Fallen Empires, up to Masks, and they went through a stage, particularly of the Urza's lot, of try to look at the combos, and they took the random cards out first to try and keep some of the more powerful cards in.
Mhm.
I mean, Tolarian Academy did go fairly early, but there was a lot of weirdness of how they banned cards. My view is, if you're going to ban or change a problem card, try and ban or change the actual problem card.
Yep.
Don't sketch around. It took a really long time with that Asher tablets, right? Of testing is, if you test liquidation and change that, does it, make Asher better or worse? I'm not sure if we've fixed Asher currently, in fairness. I think the really good players I see still playing it are still really abusing it really, really well.
Again, my suggestion still remains Ashers should work counter to each other. So if somebody else plays an Asher, that counts for the Asher count, and you have to burn all 3 yourself. Like, make the card a card that is high risk to play.
Isn't the true problem Parthenon?
No, not anymore, because they're once
anymore.
per turn.
No, because I mean, the point is, of course, you can't just play one, but with Parthenon, you don't have the drawback that it just blocks your master phase.
Yeah, you can play something else. I think it depends, because like so many of them are using just trifle cards to do stuff anyway.
Well, I mean, so Ben just won with my Gangrel deck. And I mean, it's got a single set of 4 Ashers in it because the deck is designed to thing out a bunch of Gangrel and then just start bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And once it's ready to start bleeding, it doesn't need to thing as much. It wants to recycle the reactions in the combat cards. So getting back the right amount of, which is, getting back 13 cards, which are the reactions or combat cards that I need depending on the table or a mix, like, it's still really good. Like, watching that final unfold, I mean, well, Ben is such a good player, but watching that final unfold and him like dance around being at low pool with the deck, and like, he would hit a Villain and then he'd be there and then he'd eat some, and then he got his 3rd tablet, and it was just like all of these things just kind of kept it afloat. And then, when he got the 3rd tablet, he started he put in a bunch more of his combat that he needed because his prey was doing Valkyries, and it was just like all the things just sort of fall into place. And Asher's, like, even one set of 4, and in the US you can get away with that because they're not played like they are in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's true even in Europe. So, like, UK's different anyway, right? So you've got a couple of players who play Ashers, and I did get to see some. And obviously, I talked about Antonio using them to good effect with the Protected Districts and the Animalism combat combo. But I've been on these nice trips to the Netherlands and Belgium, and there's this guy called Bram who uses and like, these are biggish tournaments, and it's not just him using them, but it's often just him using them and abusing them. So it makes it work for him, basically, which is, and he's not super reliant on them, and they're often just playing two chains, so 6 or 7, and then off they go, and it adds a bit of stability to the decks. But he does use it with some really quite audible decks. So I think there's a like Ellen Fence, Old Gangrel Anti-Tribute, and some friends there doing some rushing, and he's using that to recycle the stuff there. And it's like, that's actually what you want it to be, where you've got something that's not great to begin with, and you're making it work because you can rotate it and make it more efficient on the cards. I'm totally fine with like that. That's the really interesting thing, because like that's okay. You're just making that a tier 2 deck rather than a tier 3 or 4 deck or whatever, right? It's the I guess it's still an issue with the Gangrel, as you said, because they're super solid. But there are ways to manage it. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as Cybele or Anson dropping out a set each turn as they wanted to.
Yeah, it is better. There's no arguing here that it's that what you guys have done is a better solution of the card. But I think the gray area is it still abusive, and will it eventually, once people realize it's still abusive, will it just end up back where it was before? Just a different face. Yeah.
I think was it Weinemeyer's deck that he just did with the top decks, was that 12 Ashes that was running? Which that's exactly what I was doing with my top deck. Oh, that was running Parthenon, right? Okay, so you could spin them out. So that deck really only works to kill enough at the table if it can get that going. I would suggest in this environment, there's a bit too much combat around otherwise, I think, for it. Whereas if you can get everything through and keep piling out the cards and use it at the pool, because it was just reading his little report where he's like, I drew a Parthon and this many liquidations and this many extra tablets my opening cards, and it's like, yep. That doesn't always happen.
That deck also works because of in my opinion, the bad team ruling on how the shard works. And not differentiating permanent reduction from transient reduction for cards that are not played in the normal fashion.
Yeah, I mean that isn't the shard ruling, right? That's the power-based ruling initially, and it just rolls forward. And I think that is I mean that's been suggested by multiple people in the rulebook suggestions as a quirk. I don't know what. So the initial bit when we started doing stuff under Johannes post 2010, there were a couple of things that were sort of set down as guidelines under Pascal. One of which was like Johannes driven, was no card changes without basically being able to reprint the card. And there were a couple of exceptions, right? So they banned a couple of cards and they technically changed how Psyche worked, right? Because it made no sense playing a combat card not in combat. I can't think of anything else. But that was the idea. And then there were some other ideas which were like, okay, you've got all these rulings, we don't generally change them or overrule them, but we have creeped that, I guess, as we've changed text or cleaned things up, you have had some stuff go. So I mean that is one that is really weird, and it doesn't make any sense, right? Because you're not playing the card.
Right.
Correct.
Well, I mean, you are playing the card, but not in a normal fashion. And
correct. You could just change.
I can't sudden it or DI it, depending on whatever type of card it is, because it's not played in the normal fashion. So other cards that can cancel can't see things played abnormally. Why can cards that reduce things see things that are played abnormally?
So that comes down to so I understand why the ruling was done this way. This seems like it's rollover from a ruling around the same time by the DCI related to how you pay for things. It's the shopping cart method. When you're coming up with the total cost of something, you put everything in the bucket first, and then you throw in your coupons. And to pay for it, right? So in my opinion, the key here is the cards reduce the action cost. And if something is additive to the action cost or part of the action cost itself, it's always going to be reducible. And to write the rules to say otherwise requires you to either reword the cards completely or to create rules that are non-intuitive to the way that the card is worded.
It mostly came down to Steve issues with people not understanding why.
Right, that's what I mean by not intuitive.
Yeah. Right, not understanding why Black Cat reduced the cost of a gun, but Schwane couldn't. And the simple answer is Black Cat is a permanent effect and Schwane is a transient, and transients can only see things played in the normal fashion. But the rules team chose that everything can be reduced instead. So I'm not a member. I've never been a member of the rules team at any iteration, but that's always been a ruling I've disagreed with.
I get that, and I also kind of agree with you on the subject of it, but from a like continuity and simplicity perspective, like I think their choice was better for the average player.
I think their choice. That's not. I disagree with that because I don't think most people realize they could shard Derlet until they've seen someone shard Derlet.
Well,
right?
that comes down to the bigger question though about whether or not players learn the game correctly in general, right? If you think about the way that most people get taught games, and I can reflect this from the myriad of card games I've had to teach people, 99.9% of the players, in my opinion, have probably never picked up and read a rule book. They've learned it via the traditions. They've been passed down from generation after generation, which is why there's so many people asking what seem like really simple questions that everybody feels like they know the answer to, but like these players don't get because like they don't understand the base rule concept to begin with. So even like I was trying to think of something as simple as, a lot of it is often card timing questions, or like the most simple one I'm dealing with new players, not realizing that action modifiers have specific play timings and when they are, and just like trying to play the action after you've declared the action, because if you had somebody who taught them the rules the incorrect way, they didn't properly break down what the difference between the cards are in function, in like overall technical function. I think I'm doing a bad job explaining that, but
I mean, like, I think I get what you're saying. Like, one example there is the cards in the as played window, right?
Mm-hmm.
That window didn't really exist, right? You had cards that you played when you announced an action. There was nothing to say you couldn't shove conditioning in the same window.
Mm-hmm.
So just because, if the window exists and a card says it must be played there, doesn't mean that another card that doesn't say it must be played there can't also be played there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I do find sometimes the game could be more intuitive for new players.
I think, by the way, cancels and wait for cancels fits in that too.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's all right. You're preaching to the converted. I think it's a terrible idea. I really, it's why I tried to encourage Vincent to let me not reprint Rewind Time on print on demand for Trujar.
Oh yeah.
It's less problematic than Power of All, but both of them are bad like that. So the card would be fine if it didn't have to create its own timing effect for the wake.
But again,
and it also does weird things, right? So you look at the Flubry card, right? So people don't get that they can play an Onky V and they can still block because of that. That's really bad.
But to me, this comes down to, like, you guys have produced the impulse concept, but then it's unlet into, because like you don't want this to become a game of kind of like in response, it feels like. And I agree, if the game has like too significant a stack system, it starts to feel more like what happened to both Yu-Gi-Oh! And Naruto saw this happen. They implemented a first in last out system, and it just like it added a layer of complexity, but it also made certain cards no longer feel like what they were, right? It doesn't feel like a power anymore if everything and anything can tear off in an order before it. But you have to figure out where that balance is of flavor versus function versus like the bureaucracy of a system. And I do feel like this is one of those ways where there are cards that violate the bureaucracy of the system, and there are cards that don't. And we don't have and there's not like exception. There's nothing. This is why I think Chris was somebody who was really fighting for this. The reflex symbol should be more apparent on a lot more cards. But
I quite like his thoughts on that. Yeah. I mean, I don't really like counselling in general, because when I do judging at the ECs, I could almost say that like a third of the questions are down to counselling effects. One third play to win, 1/3 counsel, 1/3 everything else.
Yeah, but is the cancel stuff like mostly about timing? Like,
there's a lot of confusion, right? So someone's doing a vote, it gets delay versus DI is really good for votes, and try to explain why one's hit resolution, one has not hit resolution. So yes, you can do another one, but no, you can't do another Reigns of Power because that still has been played. There's things like that, right? It's nuance, which and some of that will be first English language, not first English language.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is, yeah, and some of it is you just don't see, like cards like DI were probably not seen that much. It's been reprinted obviously a lot deliberately as a promo, because the two options, either kill it or make it more accessible, so it's not just sat in a bunch of hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you see it again more, so you get people using it who understand it's a good card, but sometimes don't understand. Back to the Antonio, why can't I DI this Nefandas coming into play as an example? I've definitely had that one. Why can't I DI the Magnum coming into play for Concealed? It's like, well, you need to DI the Conceal. They've told you what it is, and they should have the card in hand when they play it. That's also confusing players. Like, why do I need that card in hand? It's like, well, because otherwise you don't have the card. You have to have the target. You have to be able to fulfill the card when you're playing it.
Yeah, he didn't play the card. He put the card on the table. Though it sounds the same, they're different concepts.
Exactly. So I think lots of that, but I quite like those. I don't know how you'd fix quirks like that anyway, because it's the game's timing rules. There aren't the impulse has been kind of bolted on, like it's always been there, right? Arguably, which is kind of Scott's approach to it, but it's been bolted on. So if you're a really old school player like me, some of it feels really clunky. And if you're a newer player and you've come from games with I get this a lot where people talk about the flows they've seen in other games, and I remember seeing the LCG flows in a Game of Thrones. I can see how some of those look easier, but I don't think timing's that complicated because it's normally play card, resolve card.
I think the main issue with timing is like there are several layers, which if Impulse was just playing cards, it would be fine. But as long as
the double impulse, like for the Hodoba Castle, is the one that keeps coming up, right?
Yeah.
Because
I mean, as long as, for example, there's a blocking Methuselah, like who is allowed to block and when? When can I play my spying mission? Not Eagle Sight.
Yeah,
I think it would help if there would just simply codified, like one Methuselah just handles everything they want to do or can do, and then it moves on to the next instead of relying on general impulse rules, because then it becomes a bit messy.
Yeah, I do. So I do think we should at least flowchart it and get someone, get a designer to do something. So probably give them somebody to go take this person's ideas that we agree, and put that into. Because I have seen one that Nathaniel posts every so often onto Discord. So that might be a good place to start. I've got a graphic designer. So we use like Moses to do a lot of our deck boxes and things like that, but I've got a separate one in the UK who I know and has got some free time who I could pay basically to do it. So it's on my list of things to do because I think that would help.
Yeah, I do have a suggestion coming up, but that's something for a different channel.
Oh. So it doesn't sound like there was anything. I mean, Steve, do you think there was anything really missing from the Ventrue deck you really, really need?
So I've been on the fence about this for a while here because I keep trying to figure out like what makes this crypt for Ventrue feel wrong, because I feel like the deck is pretty well fleshed out. Like all the cards you want are there. There's good ousting power. It feels classical. But I haven't put my finger on what it is that feels off, whether it is just the like weird discipline spread across them. And I kind of get why, because you're going for lower caps. Like these are some of the lower cap princes that we've had in years of seeing the Ventrue. I really would have liked to have just been able to play through the deck a little bit more, though. I think it's hard. This is my first time really giving a more law firm style deck a try in V5 exclusively. When I did it very long ago, it was still very early into V5, and it definitely didn't feel the same as it does now with a handful of the cards that have been added. So I think overall it's probably doing well, but I really do want to like give it a few more tweaks and see where it goes. And there was a little secret package I had hidden here that I never got to get to, and I'm curious as to whether or not that works from a design perspective. So, but I think overall I do enjoy the crypt pretty well. I think the Ventrue have a lot of very interesting vampires, and I think there's a lot of ways that you can try to do something with them for V5. Yeah. And I'm excited about trying each of them over time, but overall I think it's well enough structured. I think the only thing I would say that I really want in V5 is for Waldberg to have a G3/G5 on him, or GX, because I really want to play Waldberg with the Primogen stuff in V5 or some Waldberg like effect, but it is really strong, and also the Ventrue don't have a bunch of Primogen anyway, so it doesn't matter.
They've got all the princes, right?
Yeah, they've got all princes.
One of those on Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Steve, so my question back to you is, one of the things that I noticed right from the off with V5 was that, the crypts favor superior fortitude, right? I mean, they are like stickmen forward type crypts. And so, when it comes to traditional law firm, you're missing superior presence, right? Which is one of the
pretty regularly,
right? And I wonder if it's sort of a design change to be thinking of it more as a stickman style deck, where you're going to run 3 to 5 sticks and like 8 prevent cards instead, and just always freak drive out.
Well, so here's what I want.
One them down,
here's what I want to say on that too, though. I feel like if you don't want to correct me on this because you don't want to give your design work away, feel free to. But I feel like you guys have definitely decided that disciplines have not necessarily a direct numerical value, but there's definitely a power tiering structure to each of the disciplines. And as you're handing them out to vampires, you're very careful about like where you choose to divide them up and whether or not they align with a theoretical idea for what you want the clan to feel like or do. And I feel like the tier involves like presence being up higher on the stack. Obviously, Dominate is at king tier. You got like Protean almost right underneath it seems like, for balance, because it seems like if anything has Dominate and Protean adjacent to each other, there is some level of needing to manipulate that. But there are also disciplines that like get handed out like candy here and there. And one of them I'm surprised by is Blood Sorcery. But it's clear like when it gets handed out, it's being handed out for the purposes of pushing the power level of a specific card or maybe a clan's idea up a little bit. But it's, I understand. I think I understand that like presence not being there is about making sure that like especially the lower side of the caps of vampires, you're not doing something bad by doing it. But going back to the statement about like law firm versus stickman, I actually think both archetypes exist pretty well. And I like the idea of law firm over stickman personally, because I tend to get, this is a me thing, I tend to get bored playing stickman. I think walking stick is interesting, but I also think like the attrition thing, just, I don't know, eventually I get tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that's what I like playing. I think it's slightly more complicated just on the disciplines, right? So Ben has often found if he doesn't give people superior dominate, he gets told off.
Yeah, absolutely. But you gotta the play group. I'm sorry, and viewers that are watching this later on, you're gonna have to forgive me for saying this, but fuck you guys that are like overly boisterous about this. Like, oh, I'm not getting exactly what I want. Yeah, but okay, I want just to throw a quick bit of proof points to my statement. But whenever a game chooses to give you too much power in one state, you leech onto that, and then everybody's playing it or everybody's doing it, and everybody gets bored with the game. To keep the game fresh and running, you have to be below that state.
That's more or less his feedback to them. He just sometimes he has to give in. So if you look at the Smeese, it's probably most obvious how he's not given in there. He's deliberately given them a non-perfect crypt because we're very nervous with Protean and Dominate, and you can see it during the playtesting of what a lovely combination that is. Like the only thing that makes it not amazing is the cost of both disciplines there to do stealth anyway, right? Obviously, Earth Meld being free is a separate problem, but the Dominate and the Protean having costs for to deliver is very helpful. The Ventru, I mean, I guess I don't know. I probably need to see more. I've not actually tried them in this new form. I still have my old Group 5-6 and my Ventru sticks. I've used both of them in the last kind of 5 years, and they're all right. They're not as good as they were, and I haven't taken to putting things like
add 2 more bounces in each of them, Hugh. They'll be better.
Yeah, more bounce is probably good. But I'd also probably play. I'd probably try and squeeze in 1 or 2 seduction and the other one, Sleeping Mind.
Yeah.
Just for the ultimate end bit. But I mean, I've seen people use different combinations, right? Where people use more misdirections and more troublemakers. So the issue with the organized resistance is you can't necessarily get your governs going. If they're using a ridiculous number of organized resistances, they'll block both forwards and backwards and not worry about it, right? And then you can't get going, and that becomes problematic. But on the converse, if you're running enough secondary additions, you can also do that. Certainly to the Gangle, you can slow them down so both of you die, which is great.
Well, for the other players.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's an interesting one. I think it needs a bit more play. The Ventru could probably do with something fun, something that's a bit
Cavalier.
different.
Cavalier is what I feel like I want them to have the most.
Oh.
I also think they need resilience, which is not yet a D5.
Yeah, resilience is more acceptable.
What was
Cavalier is fine, I think, as well.
Why am I not remembering that card? This card, the Pro 1 prevent 3 non-nag. Yeah, no, that card also would be very, very nice.
Yeah, like it especially if you're gonna put aid from bats in, Fortitude needs resilience because it's the answer to Bats Crows.
Ooh,
right?
Actually, really minor gripe on this too, and I don't know how this gets resolved, but I would love for Fortitude to be a discipline that actually provides wake and not in the form of that terrible card we got a onesie of. But it really does, to me, make some amount of sense. I don't know how to cost balance that because I haven't thought extraordinarily deeply in this, but I have thought about the fact that if we can get Freak Drive, there maybe should be some sort of reaction level Freak Drive. And I think the same kind of for Celerity overall. This is unrelated to this. But I know that shifts the balance of those disciplines. But I mean, Celerity is still Celerity even if you do that, and Fortitude is still Fortitude if you do that. So I don't know. That's an aside to think about from a development perspective, and I'd love to have the debate with somebody about that in the long term. But this is not the place for it.
Well, I mean, forced vigilance at least doesn't require you to block at the superior, right? Which is
but forced vigilance. So this goes back in the conversation I want to have about how 1 blood is more than what you think 1 blood is, and more than 1 blood is way more than you think 1 blood is, but it also sometimes isn't.
I understand, but what I mean is the amount of reactions that unlock you general purpose that don't require you to block. General purpose, right?
Yeah.
It's deep ecology. That's any action. What is it? Predators.
I guess I'm making I'm misspeaking in a sort of a way. I don't. It doesn't have to be a physical unlock overall. But
no, right. But I'm saying they have one, and the superior is actually it's better than eluding, and eluding requires you to block.
It's not better than eluding though in one keyway. The only usable during a D action directed against you or something you control.
Sure. Right. Yeah. But for a clan that wants to wake and bounce, like forced vigilance is, I'm up and then I'm bouncing all day. Right. Like it has potentially a place. Because
I'm surprised it's not used actually, because if you're just running, I mean, so I always normally run 2 or 3 on QVs, right? So you can do the emergency bounce. If you can't just run secondary editions; it's too risky.
Right.
And it fits in as at least one of those slots, I would have thought. Because as you said, it's like
it's because at inferior it feels like a bad card at its cost. And then it's superior, it's specifically got to be basically against a bleed or bleed-alike action, which can leave you kind of stuck if you're in the wrong table position, and it's just a card that costs too much that has to go. I do agree. Like, I think if it was not conditional, if the wake was not conditional at superior, then I think the card is like significantly better and probably playably better, and I don't think brokenly better. It's literally eluding without a line of text for a discipline, for a superior discipline on top of it, which seems like really simple and acceptable math to me, unless we're suddenly all thinking eluding is a really strong card, but I would say the TWD doesn't reflect that. So
how many times?
No, I mean, it's great if you're playing Ankle Cog, right? But otherwise it has limitations. Right, I should probably go make some food before I get told off.
Well, thank you very much for the conversation.
No, it's good. Really good catching up. And I have to. I really should play it on Lackey more. It's quite nice. A bit clunky with interface, but it's quite nice playing. And particularly with people I don't get to see very often.
Hey, check out my blog where I have some keyboard shortcuts that you probably want to get configured.
They're really good, really smart.
But so we're doing this again, and hopefully I don't die to Hugh's illegal cards.
That's perfect. I think it's definitely worth having a look at the draft, especially because that's likely to become legal first of what things should be in there or not be in there.
Okay.
Then you probably want concealed out of that because it's in there.
Aid from bats in there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because that's probably where I'd put aid from bats. So the conceptually, you've got the draft set, and you're going to have we're going to do anthologies. How I do them, I guess, is a bit up for debate. But like conceptually, I'd probably try and do an Anarchs based one, a Stabat based one, maybe a couple of Camarilla ones, or Cam based. Like try and make them useful for. Here's a mini expansion pack for this stuff all in one place.
Okay, I'm going to leave this
proportions ratios difficult, but that's the idea.
I want to leave this last part in here just so that maybe it can be reviewed, because I think right now there's going to be blur points. So my question is, after all is said and done, in blurring, can I just blur the name of the thing, or will I have to just cut entire chunks out of the conversations been had and have to have precision about it? Because if I remember right, the contents of draft set are currently not available to all people. Is that correct?
I got no concerns with sharing it. It's fine. The reason for not publishing it and sharing it is to, in the nicest way, we love players, we love feedback, but getting unstructured feedback from a lot of people in one go is difficult to manage. So the idea of giving it out to, here you are, a group that we know we've played draft before or are really interested in draft. So we've got a few sets in the US, a few sets in France, and the Germans have tried it, the Portuguese and so on. It's just getting people to try it who can then nail down that feedback, rather than we could talk a lot about some of the ratios or some of the cards in there, and there are some good questions. Like there are 4 commons as an example, which have been pointed out by a couple of sets of people, including Carl. They appear half the times compared to the other commons. That need to figure out what's thinking behind that. Is that deliberate, or is that just because we're trying to fit particular
it
things
turns
in.
them into uncommons,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
fine given maybe what the cards are. One of them is Faceless Knight, for instance, and that's probably fine that Faceless Knight's an uncommon, and they didn't want it. But I think the sort of the misconception that I have, or that I'm concerned that players might have, is they see the red black chantry on it. They're like, oh, it's a common, so that should be here 4 times. My chances of seeing another Faceless Knight are greater than my chances to see this other uncommon. But if they realize it's an uncommon in the common slot, they may choose to take it over some other uncommon or rare that they're seeing in the pack.
Agreed.
And that's the biggest issue I have. Not necessarily like power-wise, maybe you want that to be an uncommon because a single Faceless Knight might get 2 to 3 actions to succeed, right?
Yeah, it's pretty powerful in draft, and there are some other examples. Like there's some whole selection of interesting cards in there that haven't been printed, and some of them I'm like, oh, actually no. In retrospect, like I understand that I might want them printed and be available, but I'd rather have you on POD. One example of that is Monarch of Clarity. I don't want that in the draft kit.
And you might want to think about Major Boon.
Yes, that's also been mentioned by 2 other people. Thank you.
Yeah. When I saw that in there, I wept a little bit. I'm like, no.
It's a bad idea. I also think there's too much. I've had some feedback from some of the other people who've tried it out in terms of number of timed tables. There's a relatively large amount of basic pool gain in there, so that's Blood Doll, Vessel, Minion Tap, and Villain. I've played a lot of draft. I don't know if I've played the most draft. If I add Duff in draft and double draft and draft in, I'm pretty sure I've probably played the most draft. And any player who regularly still plays, that makes sense. But I don't know, if the average is that players could get 1 2/3 of a regular normal pool gain, that's probably too much. I want people ousting.
Yeah.
Because you've got all of the hunting grounds in there as well.
Yeah.
It makes the Blood Dolls and Vessels super powerful. The Vessels really, really powerful. I'd probably drop the Vessels and just have Blood Dolls.
Yeah, I feel like there might be some commons that you would want double commons of, right? Like the Blood Doll. Like if you could just take the Vessels and turn them all in. I think they're both commons right now, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Like, is anyone going to be upset that we make a double common out of a Blood Doll? No. Like, it lets them, do something in the game. But that's maybe we're keeping you from your food, but yeah.
Well, yeah. All right. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah,
and don't.
Indeed.
I'm sure Henrik will love listening to this and watching this, but I don't think he will have any concerns because like the draft thing. I'm just going to take some time over producing it and try and produce it once because we would like to print it at Carter Monday rather than just have it in print on demand. That's why it's taking a while.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then I'm just going to throw this last bit in there for Henrik here, but I just want to say thank you either way for all that you do. I know it's a lot to have to listen through all of these things when we do this, so we really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm sure he'll really appreciate that. I'm not sure he enjoys listening to my voice for that long, yeah.
All right. On that note, good night, everyone.
Good night.